War is awesome. Highly trained, emotionless career soldiers carry out their missions with precision and honor. With guns blazing and non-stop explosions, the good guys finally give the bad guys what's coming to them, with hardly a civilian casualty. At least, that's what a lot of video games would have you believe. But in reality, war is ugly and messy. It's often born from hate, prejudice, and greed, with ordinary people who would much rather go back to their peaceful lives caught up in the fighting on both sides of the conflict. Valkyria Chronicles confronts us with a glimpse of this view, and that's part of what makes it one of a kind. It manages to confront us with the horrors of war, even dealing with some sensitive issues, while keeping a generally light tone and delivering an incredibly enjoyable gaming experience. Originally released on the PlayStation 3 way back in 2008, it was eventually ported to the PC in 2014, and will see a remastered release for the PlayStation 4 in 2016. The game spawned 2 sequels on the PSP, with the third game only seeing a Japanese release. There's really nothing quite like Valkyria Chronicles, and I think you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. Let's take a look at what's so great about Valkyria Chronicles. Unfortunately, history's not all that exciting to some people. Sega was understandably worried about this, so Valkyria Chronicles takes place in a detailed historical fantasy setting instead of the real world. I say historical fantasy because it's not exactly an alternate history, nor is it a complete fantasy environment. All of the countries are fictional, but have intended real-world analogs. Gallia seems like the Netherlands mixed with a bit of Austria, for example. The location is Eastern Europe, sort of. On planet Earth, basically. The time period is the mid-1930s, but with a few technological twists thrown in thanks to a fictional mineral known as ragnite being the chief power source rather than oil. And like oil, most of the fighting seems to be over who has the best access to it. Having this slightly fantasy setting helps to lighten the potential controversy that might come along with a plot of this sort. Speaking of controversy, another great thing about Valkyria Chronicles is the racism. No, I'm not saying racism's great. Racism's the worst. I'm just saying that in this... Alright, just hear me out. Few games even come close to dealing with issues like prejudice and racism. Fewer still acknowledge atrocities like slavery, genocide, and concentration camps. Valkyria Chronicles tackles them all head-on.
Who let her in anyway? You really think I'm gonna work with a dark hair?
Take a good look at that shawl. She's a Darkson.
And that explains it. I thought this place stunk.
In the world of Valkyria Chronicles, the Darksons are a marginalized ethnic group blamed for a cataclysm that took place in the ancient past.
No evidence exists to substantiate what you call the Darkson calamity. It's a myth.
Excuse me? So what, you're calling me stupid now?
Stop it, that's enough!
Because of this, they've been the subject of ethnic cleansings and slave labor for centuries. A few characters you have to work with actually have Darkson hater as a trait, and will perform poorly when near any characters of that ethnicity. Some of your squad members will learn to overcome their prejudice through the events of the game, but not all of them. It's difficult to go into more detail without spoiling the story, so just trust me, it's handled remarkably well. And speaking of the story, there's a great story here. The plot follows the exploits of Gallian Militia Squad 7, led by Tank Commander Welkin Gunther, a biology student and son of a war hero, and Alicia Melchiot, an aspiring baker and leader of the town watch in her home city of Brule. What begins as the defense of their city against the invading empire gradually becomes something much more. Again, I don't want to spoil the story for you. You'll just have to experience it for yourself. You may have noticed, but so far, none of this has had anything to do with the actual gameplay. Don't worry, the excellent combat system is one of the things that makes this game so great. Valkyria Chronicles is a turn-based strategy game, like Fire Emblem, Shining Force, or XCOM, but with a twist. When you choose which character to move, you're then controlling them in real time as they move across the battlefield. While in this mode, enemies who have line of sight can take shots at you, so unlike in other strategy games, you can be killed while just moving around. The same is true for enemy units. This adds some tension and excitement to the combat that is often missing from strategy games. There are 5 different types of soldiers in Valkyria Chronicles. Scouts can move the farthest on the field per turn, and are good for spotting enemy troops and taking enemy bases. Shock troopers have greater defensive and offensive capabilities than a scout, wielding machine guns and mowing down enemies at close range. Lancers have great defensive abilities and carry large lances which are actually bazookas, chiefly used for taking out enemy tanks. Snipers can eliminate enemy units with one well-placed hit, but are best kept out of direct combat. And finally, engineers keep your tank repaired, dismantle landmines, and rebuild barricades around the battlefield. For most of the game, Welkin commands the one and only tank on your team, the Edelweiss. Due to the way Ragnite power works, every vehicle has a large and vulnerable heat sink on the back. It's good strategy to sneak a Lancer behind enemy tanks and take them out with one shot, but be careful to protect the back of your own tank from enemies trying to do the same. If you lose the Edelweiss, it's game over. There's a lot more I could cover about combat. There are weapon and armor development trees and training for your troops. Different maps have different victory conditions and qualities that vary the gameplay. Every character has their own character strengths and flaws that can randomly activate during combat, swinging the tide of battle in either side's favor. The combat never gets stale, and there's enough variety to keep you on your toes. Finally, there's no mistaking the unique artistic style of Valkyria Chronicles. The story is narrated as if being recited from a book written by Irene, a journalist embedded with Squad 7 during the events of the game. The soft, watercolor style of the graphics reminds the player that this is a chronicle of historic events, as if we're seeing illustrations in a book brought to life by our imagination. So that's Valkyria Chronicles in a nutshell. With the recent PC version available and now an HD remake being released for the PlayStation 4, this is the perfect time to catch up if you missed out the first time around. If any of this piqued your interest, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you already love Valkyria Chronicles and want to convince a friend to give it a shot, why not share this video with them? And please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.